What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan the Valley coming at you with another solo podcast. It is a mailbag, and these things will be done solo a lot of the time since, like I said, it feels like I can have a conversation with you all. Recording this on a late Monday morning post-gym workout. Wanted to have it up Sunday night into Monday, but I conked out. Spoiler alert, 2 all-nighters that past week and averaging like 3-4 hours of sleep on the other nights. Body's not built for it anymore. And I crashed for most of Sunday. Caught a little bit of Grizzlies Blazers. I thought the Grizzlies were going to, one, lose to the Blazers again. And two, I couldn't wrap my head around. I feel like the Grizzlies and the Blazers have played 8 times this year, maybe even 9. That end of that game was just Grizzlies time. They got to win. Not that anyone cares about that, just in case you want to know why this wasn't up on a Monday. Before we get started, the usual reminders, please remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, those are the 3 biggest mediums for us. Leave ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify. If you have not already, 5 stars only. You can leave constructive criticism if you would like in your review. But again, the written reviews and the ratings do help us climb the charts. Follow us on the socials. You can see the links to those in the podcast and YouTube description or on screen on YouTube. Join our Discord if you want. I try to monitor the YouTube comments, but I really, honestly, I can't. Shout out to Rome8180 for defending me against Magic fans in the breakout thing. I had tears. I talked about all these different players and Magic fans. Who's broken out for you this year? I think Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are going to be like studs, multi-time all-stars, but either of them, Paolo is starting to come along after a slow start. They're not like, it was just based off what we've seen so much this season. But again, love you all, Orlando Magic fans. The fact that you watch and listen, love you. So join our Discord if you want to dictate some of the discussion. You can answer mailbag questions. I don't know how often we're going to do these this year, just because I want to make sure we have enough material for a good episode. So maybe it's every other week. Maybe I do 1 week Twitter, 1 week Discord. Join Discord. You can ask about the Magic. You can ask about the Jazz. We're going to talk about the Jazz today. I believe that's everything. If you want to support the show also, you can buy our merch. We will have new stuff eventually. I'm not wearing a shirt because it's post-gym. That's also why I look so disheveled probably. But like, you get these cool stickers that you can put on your bottles. So go support the show. Link to our stores in the podcast and YouTube description. And finally, but not leastly, most importantly, we have a birthday shout out to Rubik's Gal. Recording this on your actual birthday, which I believe is November 6th. Hopefully you hear it. If not, happy belated birthday, but happy actual birthday as well from your wife who DM'd us on Instagram. More than happy to throw that shout out. Rubik's Gal has been great at sending us guests, the NBA players. You have inspired other people to send them to us. I have some in my Twitter DMs, my Discord DMs. If I have not responded to you all, I promise I'll try and get to it. So you have started a trend. They have been great. I love trying to stump the ever-living hell out of Grant every time those things pop up. So thank you for sending us all of those. And for your birthday, since I've been told you do not really have a favorite team, but you do like to root for maybe Jimmy Buckets or yell about Tobias Harris, it does seem like you might be the most loyal or invested in the Warriors. So for your birthday, I tried to get in touch with the Dubs and get them to promise that they would play Brandon Przemski at least, like, I don't know, 20 minutes a game for the rest of the week. I hope you just get some good pods minutes for your birthday. And not on your birthday. I don't even know if the Warriors are playing. I haven't looked at the schedule tonight, but your birthday week, I hope that pods gets lots of minutes. So shout out Rubik's Gal, happy birthday from your wife and myself and Grant and just everyone at the HardwoodKnocks community, because we know that everyone would like to wish you happy birthday, I'm sure. We now move to the actual mailbag portion of this podcast. I'm going to have to, like I said, I will try and timestamp this as I go along, so I don't have to do it later. If you see my hands going like this or my eyes kind of squint, that's what I'm doing. Should you be watching on YouTube? Let's start with Austin. Had this question that we did not get to when I did the breakout players / NBA in-season tournament mailbag. What is it going to take to have Nike put down the pencil for a year and actually make a good 32 set of alternate jerseys? Man, I don't fucking know, but they definitely they need to. And here's the thing. There's not going to be, you're not going to have all of these hits. I get it. Not everyone's going to like every jersey, but they're so bad. They're either so creative or they just don't make any sense. And then they kind of hide behind, well, this is a tribute to X. And then I feel bad criticizing something because it's supposed to be a tribute to the fabric of the city. No, they're bad this year. There's only a very handful of good ones. Grant and I think we'll have a rankings of them as a segment on one of the upcoming shows. I enjoyed the courts. I mentioned that on the in-season tournament, but I respect teams if they want to take a chance. And so it was like, you look at the Warriors and the Lakers jerseys this year, which are objectively bad, but I kind of like, oh, at least they tried something different with the font or the angle of the font. That's where we're at, where I'm just appreciating teams that go outside the beaten path. That's why I really like the Nets one. What was the other one I really liked? I mean, Utah's was great, but that kind of like a conservative backdrop there when you're looking at it. There were just a very few, there are a handful of ones that the Pacers one. I appreciated that one as well. I almost appreciated the Clippers one, but I get very much, Microsoft Windows vibes, that paperclip that used to kind of show up. That's what when I see the clips, that's what I think of. I don't know whether I like it or love it. Let's just see teams take more chances and be actually inventive, or then just roll it back. And, if you're allowed to go, and you are allowed to go, just tap into the nostalgia element, which is where we've run out of good ideas when it comes to TV shows and movies. It seems we're just going to reboot that or remake this or make sequels and prequels off of that. Just go back. And it's like, you can't go wrong with some of these classic jerseys as well. And so I recognize you're not going to please anybody, but like there needs to be, like, these were objectively at least 2/3 of the leagues were pretty bad this year. So that's where I'm at on that. I would like them to just be more creative. I like loud stuff, and I recognize not a lot of people like the loud colors and the explosions of colors. So again, you can't cater to everyone's taste. At the same time, could we just get to a point where they're not underwhelmingly or overwhelmingly plain or underwhelmingly creative or innovative? They're not pushing any sort of bill. And we're at a point where, okay, the New York Knicks have like this reflective, like holographic font where it's like the backdrop on. I'm like, wow, that's really fucking good and clever. And then no, it's not. The jersey it looks fine. Seeing players wear them. I liked some of them a little bit more, but no, like you can't get bonus points for, oh, you just didn't suck, or you were like kind of creative relative to these other jerseys that weren't creative at all. So the Knicks jerseys are good, but they're not on the scale of, wow, these are amazing. It's because you would be grading on a curve. I don't want to grade on a curve. I want to be entertained when I see these jerseys. I want to wear them other than to do yard work or when it's laundry day. So that's where I'm at on those. Let's get to this next question from from unbiased Pistons fan. Can I get a national perspective on why Killian Hayes starts and gets more minutes than Jaden Ivey? Whew, man. So I asked some people about this, and I've been told that there is other things that I am not factoring in, and I was not told what those things are. So I'm going to continue to lampoon this decision. I think that when you look at it we do get too caught up in who's starting. I want to make that clear. But if you think that someone needs to start, and we know that Jaden Ivey is not happy by coming off the bench, you could get to a pattern where it's staggering. Or if you're going to come off the bench and you're still just getting a crap ton of minutes, don't get too bent out of shape about not starting. I think if you look at it from two perspectives, Monty Williams is notoriously just holds his point guards to a higher standard, especially on the defensive end. And I think that would account for at least some of the decision-making here, going with Killian Hayes over Jaden Ivey, or even going with Marcus Sasser at points, just because he's giving, he's just going to be better on that end. He's giving you like more gritty minutes there. It feels like, from what I've seen. I want to make it clear, I've not seen every single minute of every single Pistons game. And then also just the Killian Hayes stuff. It's size for switching. And I believe, I didn't get confirmation on the data, but it feels like the Pistons, they are going to like to switch with some of their lineups. And so Killian Hayes is going to be better for that. He's not as eminently screenable either. Just from I'm talking about, never mind the effort. Just, it's harder to screen Killian Hayes right now than it is Jaden Ivey. I'm just like, what are we doing here? You have this pick equity, this future equity invested in Jaden Ivey, and he's played better offensively than Killian Hayes for sure. He's shooting less, how much is like 47% on catch and shoot threes. That's a big deal. So this isn't a matter of, well, the Pistons really want spacing or they don't think he could play next to Cade. If I thought it was, well, they want him to kind of just build up as the floor general type in these lineups where it's all him, you could kind of hide behind that, but like, he's still playing a bunch with Marcus Sasser. He's playing a bunch we've seen him play with Cade for sure. We've even seen him play some minutes with Killian Hayes, which I don't need to see that. I'm not going to lie. That's not something. I mean, one of the lineups that they actually played, which one was it? I mean, like, first of all, the lineup that's been kind of frisky that they've rolled out, Sasser, Ivey, Burks, Joe Harris, and Bagley, it's just been a little bit friskier than I thought. I'm like on kind of holding up better on defense than I would have predicted. And they're just like lighting it up on offense. I want to know, aside from the defensive thing, I need someone to tell me then what if someone who's plugged into the Pistons, excuse me. I do read James Edwards of The Athletic. I follow Pistons people on Twitter. They all seem pretty frustrated, not James Edwards, he's a reporter, about what the Pistons are doing with Jaden Ivey. I don't have a good explanation. I think it's a bad decision because I think that you want to show that confidence in him. And look, you just don't have the equity invested in Killian Hayes anymore. You didn't sign him to an extension. I guess I wouldn't be shocked if he's still on the Pistons, but like this is someone that you could look at moving in advance of restricted free agency, or who you've at least proven, oh, we're not going to pay him a bunch of money. If it came down to, we want to make sure that Cade has the ball in his hands a bunch, and we're really leaning into this. And I mean, Cade Cunningham, the turnovers, an issue, the finishing, still an issue. He's been by and large spectacular. Big. People writing him off as just, oh, he's going to be good, maybe an all-star, but he can't be a superstar. I disagree. I'm not there yet. And I don't think I'm going to get there. So just play him more. If you're not going to start him, I get it. But like this needs to be someone who is closer to 30 minutes per game than not. And you want the information of, okay, let's see what he looks like next to not just Cade, but let's look at what he looks like next to Orsar Thompson as well. And if you think these guys are a bad fit together, find out now before there's actual expectations. The fact that, as I'm recording this, 32 possessions, we've seen Ivy, Orsar Thompson, and Cade Cunningham on the floor together. Just this feels like malpractice. And they've not been good minutes. I want to make that clear. It's 32 possessions, though. Like, find out what you have in. I don't want to say they're your, like, are they your three most important players in the building? No, because Jalen Duren exists. And I think he's your second most important player at this point. But when you're talking about your perimeter guys, those are your three most important perimeter guys as of now moving forward. Find out if they can all play together. And so I do think that they're doing themselves, never mind the whether he's starting or not. I think they're doing themselves a disservice with the way that they are kind of limiting Ivy's minutes. I get that you want to see him earn them, but I actually think that he's given you some pretty like highs on offense this year. I'm puzzled, to say the least. So if anyone wants to crack that code and they're not, related to Monty Williams, or just super like, you don't watch the Pistons and Ivy sucks and this is gonna help groom him into a superstar. If you have actual answers to this, because I don't have any rational ones, please let me know. I'd really appreciate it. Next question comes from, this came from HP Burgie. What team and what deep cut player are your biggest positive surprises this season? I already did this podcast of breakout players. But I will, the two things that I will stand out just in case you didn't listen to the breakout player podcast, go ahead, check that one out, HP Burgie. And I appreciate this question. Jalen Johnson's the one I'm kind of obsessed with. He's been really good, I think, defensively, running the floor super well, finishing well on his twos, kind of hitting the glass for them. His hands are just everywhere. They are everywhere. And I would like to see him hit more of his trailer jumpers and more of his jumpers in general, but he's been, I think, by and large, pretty fantastic for the Hawks. Gives them a lot of defensive optionality as well. And I think, look, if he can kind of control the ball a little bit better on the move, this dude's for his position, like a caps lock passer. And so that's probably the benefit. One of the benefits of moving John Collins is getting a more extensive look at him. But I'm a big Jalen Johnson guy. And I think I didn't cover a team. And so this would be like the actual good answer to your question, HP Burgie. I know they've played a soft schedule, but I'm not sure that I expected the Mavericks just to be 5-1 as I record this. And okay, their lone loss is coming against Denver Nuggets, like the real opponent that they've played. But I've been really impressed with that team overall and how hard they're playing whenever I watch them. Luka's been spectacular to start the season. Did I mention this? I might have mentioned this on the breakout one. The fact that he's complaining less just feels like a really big deal. And we've seen better effort from him on defense, almost out of necessity. Grant Williams, I'm still uncomfortable with giving up the pick swap to get off of Reggie Bullock's money that in 2030. That was just awkward, but he's been great for the Mavs. He's shooting like 1,000,000,000% from three, really stretching the floor. He's done well on switches. And then look, Derek Lively, he just gets it. We had a little clip on him for this podcast already, so I don't want to spend more time on it. This is just, I still see people saying, well, I'm a little uneasy what their ceiling is going to be, kind of playing a rookie big. And I'm just like, all right, what do you want them to do? I just you're looking at the options. And I think by far he's been defensively, but maybe by far is a little bit. Grant Williams, if you want to include him, we don't want Grant Williams playing a ton of center, but Lively's just been the chemistry he has with Luka Doncic, incredible already. Like, and that's giving Luka a lob threat, the likes of which he's really just never had to this degree. I know Dwight Powell's been there for a minute, but like that was never KP's strong suit. And like Derek Lively's really explosive. He's held up well, I think, as a rim protector, as someone who's not super strong just yet, and like is just a rookie in general. And he's tapped with doing a lot of different things. And some of the rim protection numbers aren't going to be favorable, but limiting opponents to about 61.5% shooting around the basket. That's not, we're talking about a rookie who's starting, shouldering a ton. The way that he's able to move on defense, and then I've mentioned this before, and it's stuck. Him just being able to get off the rim quickly on his finishes and then looking to get back on defense. So the Mavs just being this good, especially with Kyrie missing time, to where we're at the point where I think they're losing the minutes with Kyrie on the court, definitely skewed just because we're talking about such a small sample size. The Mavs have impressed me. Just because they look like a team that, they still need to make a move. And, I do question some of the decisions with some of their lineups, their starting lineups, where it's, hey, do we need a little bit of Josh Green here? Is that even the answer necessarily defensively? I don't want to get too caught up in that, but when we're seeing, I like having the idea of Derek Jones Jr. has been really good. I might prefer to see Josh Green in the starting lineup than him, just as your offense doesn't need it, I guess. And Derek Jones Jr. has hit some good spot up looks this year, but like, let's kind of maximize the spacing. And I don't know that you're giving up some defensively there, but look, it's working. So I can't but again, they beat the Spurs. They beat the Nets, are a quality team to get a win. They hammered on the Grizzlies. They beat the Bulls. They beat the Hornets, and Sunday night was just a friggin' wild game. So I'm not going to complain about it. That's just like one of the oddities. But again, D-Double-J has been better than like I would have expected, while being used more, frankly, than I would have expected for this team. So they're the team. I guess they're not a deep cut team. So apologies for that, HP Burgess. I guess, is it just the Spurs being good, where they could very easily, when you look at how some of their games have unfolded, be above 500? So I don't know if there's a deep cut team. I'll say, here's a deep cut one for you, HP Burge, anyone else listening. I am pleasantly surprised, a little bit flummoxed by how little fucks the Washington Wizards just give. It's not that they're not trying, but they just don't care. Like, they'll hold the Jordan Poole throwing the thing off the backboard down 20. I love it. I love that energy. Like, they're getting blown out by the Heat in that in-season tournament game. They're just kind of just scrapping their way back to ruin some of the point differential. I appreciate the vibes. This is the zero fucks given team, I think, is the Washington Wizards. They're going to carry themselves with an air of bravado at points in games. They'd be down like 30, or they just have no chance of winning. I respect it and appreciate it. That is my deep cut reaction. Shout out to all the believers in Bilal Coulibaly there, though. We're still there. Next question comes from Rubik's Gal, asking, look, and this was kind of a joke question, but for real, I'm gonna tackle this. James Harden saying, what is the least self-aware comment? James Harden saying, I am a system, or Draymond Green complaining about last season's Warriors team chemistry? I think it's the James Harden quote. And let's start with Draymond specifically. I think it's funny that he's the one who's saying that, because he is the guy who punched Jordan Poole and probably added, I would love to know what contract Jordan Poole signs last year if Draymond Green doesn't punch him. I feel like there's at least an extra $5 million in guaranteed money caked into that deal because Draymond fried his face. There was other stuff going on with the Warriors, though, where it was like young guys not really appreciating their role. There were reports, I think, like even guys like JaMychal Green were kind of rankled with how they were being played and used. And so there was clearly other stuff going on there aside from the Green Jordan Poole stuff. And Green should be allowed to comment on that. It's just hysterical that the biggest shift and turning point was clearly just him punching Jordan Poole. But if they were getting to that point anyway, those could have been issues that bubbled to the surface in the middle of the year. And that could be a larger comment on the chemistry of that team at large. But the Harden stuff, and everyone said they were being taken out of context. He did give a lengthy answer. And I think I might have even mentioned this on one of the pods we did since then, is that he does feel like he was betrayed by Daryl Morey. This doesn't feel like a performative response where Chris Paul just blatantly says stuff that I think is not true because he's trying to game the system, and Chris Chris Paul, high IQ. I did not get that vibe from James Harden, but there is a level of ignorance here to saying that I am a system when, okay, you are, and you can be a pretty damn effective one during the regular season. It has not come close, save for 1 year. And you had CP3 on your team. It has not come close to getting you a title. So there are limits to James Harden, the system. And to not acknowledge that, or to say that coming into a new team where, like, even Russ, when he joined the Clippers and ever since then, has been more. I mean, he did say, he had the quote about how he views himself as a point guard, and he could have been, I guess, more generous of, oh, I'm fine moving around positions and I don't need to start, blah, 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 blah. And we know that they're going to start him. I'm recording this before Harden's debut. But just like, you're James Harden, you're coming into, and I'm sure he'll be different behind the scenes, and maybe he will be more open to adapting, but to just frame it as just like, I need to be, or I am the system, with a straight face here, when there's been clear limitations placed on how far that could get you. And when you're joining a new team that you pushed to be traded to, and you're going to need, everyone's going to need to adapt and make concessions here. That's just not, James Harden's going to have to spend more time off the ball, or the Clippers are going to have to get super creative with their staggering, or he's going to have to give more damns on the defensive end, depending on what type of lineups they run. If you want to start Russ and James Harden together with Zubats, like, and there needs to be one of those guys, needs to give a shit on the defensive end between Russ and James Harden. And Russ is on ball defense with the Clippers. I think he's been fairly, and we're not just talking about the postseason last year. Like, that's someone who's given you some good oddball moments over the years anyway. But if those two guys are going to be targeted or putting a bunch of actions in the half court, it puts a lot on Zubats behind them. And then also just Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in general, maybe having to guard up to more point of attack stuff. It's a comments that's lacking self-awareness to, like, the up-teens degree, even if you want to put actual legitimacy behind some of what he said, where I didn't take his I was on a leash in Philly comments to believe that, oh, they just wanted me to get rid of the ball, or I didn't have the ball. It just felt like Doc wanted more of a final say over the offense rather than letting James Harden have that type of agency. But he still had supreme control of the offense, even if you didn't view him as the top option. So this is still a really good player. And I would bet on the Clippers having some, when they're at full strength, incredibly high peaks. I just don't trust him to adapt enough. Where we talk about these players who they've been so heliocentric for a bunch of their career, or so ball dominant. Can you trust them to play different styles? I think we've seen Chris Paul make strides as someone who needs to adapt even before he went to the Warriors. Like, we're talking about days in Phoenix. We're about Devin Booker. When we're talking about stars, who adapt to different roles, as soon as CP3 comes in there and the stakes get higher, and Devin Booker's always been pretty scalable, but like, he was able to just take that to another level. And we've seen it, not as much this season because of injuries. Like, we've still seen it in the couple of games that he's played for Phoenix. And then, so you get to the question of, like, well, can Trae Young play differently? Can Luka Doncic play differently? Between those two and James Harden, I'm honestly wondering who's the player that's going to be less equipped to adjust, or that you would trust less to adjust. Is it Harden? I feel like maybe it's Luka. I don't know. It's not Luka. I don't think it's Luka. I think he's just too talented and too big to where, like, even if you needed to use him as a play finisher, something James Harden can't do. Maybe it's Trae Young. But like, you can envision, there's at least the vision of, you can imagine Trae Young kind of flying around off the ball a little more. Do you get that from Harden? Can he do something other than play bystander duty when he doesn't have the ball on offense? And I think that's a fair critique. I think James Harden's still really good. I think this Clippers team at full strength probably is still going to be really good. It's going to take some lineup tweaks. I think they're actually going to have to make another type of trade. I do not think, and maybe I'm really gonna have to figure out how to title these mailbag podcasts. They don't normally get the eyeballs that they should on YouTube. And should I use the hook of, is James Harden of the Clippers destined to fail? And then people can skip to the timestamp and see what the actual take is. No idea. I don't think it's destined to fail. I think a lot of people believe that something's going to go wrong, especially with the Russ Harden dynamic. The stakes are so low with Russ's contract that if it's really not working, and Russ is one of the reasons why, I think you can easily move him to the bench, or just start staggering super aggressively, or you just get rid of Russ. I don't think he's going to be the issue, though, just based off what we've kind of seen over the years. That's my long-winded way, Rubik's Gal, of saying, yeah, this is on James Harden. Like, that comment lacked more self-awareness than anything Draymond has said. Another question from Rubik's Gal here. Does the Bucks coaching staff understand that Lopez's rim production was what made the Bucks one of the best defenses in the NBA? No, obviously. So I will say, before we got to the in-season tournament, the Bucks were 24th in half-court defense and dead last in transition defense. Not the frequency, but just when you're looking at opponents' points scored per play in transition. They did have Brook Lopez play more drop against the Knicks, and the result was they held him to 57.1% shooting at the rim. And Adrian Griffin went on. I actually clipped that and put it on Twitter. I don't know if anyone saw it, but he went on, did the mid-game interview with ESPN and said, our players wanted Brook in a drop more, and so I listened to them, and it's working. There are some people dunking on that. I posted it because there's been a lot of fair critiques of Adrian Griffin, and I still think, look, I probably wouldn't have fired Bud. I think Bucks fans have been vehemently against that. And if he lost the locker room and Giannis wanted to change, which it does feel like without putting the onus on Giannis, he really did want to change. I get it. I wouldn't have gone with, maybe I'll be wrong, I wouldn't have gone with Adrian Griffin. The stakes are just too high to have gone with a rookie head coach here. This wasn't a Raptors situation when Nick Nurse took over. It was, and I guess it's different because they have Dame and Giannis sign the extension, so you could afford to be a little bit more patient. But looking at the age of Middleton, Lopez, Dame, of course, you didn't know you were going to get him then. They're just, we don't know if it was the wrong hire yet. This is why we play the games. My point is, people were dunking on him for saying that. I posted it because I thought it showed self-awareness from Griffin to acknowledge, okay, we're only a few games into the season. This isn't working, bringing Lopez higher up a lot of the time. It's putting a strain on our defense, both in the half court and even in transition when you kind of look at how their offense has been running. So to make that change, to listen to the players, I think that's a really good sign. And so I wasn't dunking on him in any sort of way. But I will say there are still issues with the defense. They're not getting back in transition off misses. And that's been a pretty big deal. Their point of attack defense, containing off screens, is another issue. They just don't really have the personnel to do it. I keep thinking this team could look a lot different if they had just paid Javon Carter. They right now, though, you're even looking not just at the point of attack, but all over. They have the league's worst defense when defending against screens right now. So that's an area where maybe having Brook Lopez drop more, just being around the rim, takes care of some of it. But there's stuff up top that's been pretty difficult, and they've leaned more on Marjon Beauchamp. I think maybe he could end up being a sneaky option to kind of help them get it together there. But as of right now, when you look at the makeup of this roster, how easy it is to screen Damian Lillard out of plays, this might be a season-long issue. And I don't think it's going to mean their defense is awful. I'm curious to see moving forward. Do they try and vary up their coverages more? Do they kind of revert? Okay, Lopez, he's going to be in a drop. He's one of the best rim protectors in the game. That's just how we have to operate. Do we see Giannis maybe trying to clean more stuff up top, which we still really, at least I have yet to see a ton of? They have options, but when you look at the personnel on this roster, you're almost like they might need to go externally for an answer, but they don't have the assets to go do that. And then you start to wonder, okay, can Pat Connaughton or even Bobby Portis Jr., who's pretty important to what the Bucks are doing, can those contracts get you anything? So I would expect to see more just based off what Griffin said on that game against the Knicks. The caveat there, though, is it was the Knicks. I'm not trolling the Knicks here, but their offense has been rough to start. And so it's a lot easier for that to look good against New York. I'll be interested to see how it looks in assuming that they do revert to using Brook Lopez as more of a drop guy, how it looks against teams that are fielding better offenses. Another question from Rubik's Gal here. If you move, I remember. Yeah. Okay. I spent time on this one. This was a thinker. If you moved all the healthy Houston, Detroit, and Memphis players on one team, could you put together a consistent 10-man rotation today? I'm not talking about putting together a contender, just a play-in team. So here are the limitations that I set for myself, and also injuries did. No Tari Eason, no John Morant, no Bojan Bogdanovic, no Monte Morris, no Steven Adams. Those were the players that I missed the most personally when going through this exercise. So here would be my starting lineup from again, Houston, Detroit, and Memphis, trying to build a 10-man rotation with just healthy players. I have Cade Cunningham with Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Alperen Sengun in the starting five. That's a pretty, I don't know how much Alperen Sengun people have watched this year. He's playing really well. I actually really like this starting unit. There is Alperen Sengun, a defensive net negative. Cade Cunningham and Bane probably close to league average. This could be a pretty good defensive lineup, and I'm taking 3 Grizzlies players from it, but I make no apologies. I did think about putting Jalen Duren over Şengün in this lineup, but I with Smart, I kind of want to make sure that we have a big that maybe he's going to space the floor a little bit better, and Şengün has done a pretty good job of that this season. I thought I also had enough defense to, hey, let's throw Şengün in here because I have Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., even Bane and Cunningham. But Jalen Duren, my first reserve. Fred VanVleet, my second reserve. Things went off the rails here where I just don't feel confident in anything. I have Ausar Thompson as a reserve. I appreciate his defensive energy. I don't have Amen Thompson in this. Is that sacrilegious? I have Jabari Smith Jr. and Jalen Green, neither of whom has come out like gangbusters on the offensive end to start the season. I just wanted another big here, and Jabari Smith Jr., you could toggle between both big man spots pretty easily. And then Jalen Green is just, I know what his peak can look like. And so I'm going to trust a little bit more that he's going to give me consistency that an Amen Thompson cannot. Or, if you want to sub out Amen for Ausar Thompson, I guess I would listen, but I've probably seen more of Ausar Thompson this year, to be fair. I've just been more impressed with him than Amen. This was not easy. I think once you get this, for the first 7 guys, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, Cade, Bane, Smart, Triple J, Şengün, Duren, and Fred VanVleet, kind of feel like home runs there. Like, that's a really good 7-man rotation team. I think this ends up being a play-in team. What say all of you? Let me know. Next question comes from Real Syrup 2219. Real question. Should we already be concerned about the Suns? I know they've played entirely without Beal and sporadically without Booker, but their problem is defense, and I don't see either of those guys coming back to anchor them on that end. Their crunch time D rating is 123. That's not going to get it done. Their offensive rating is somehow worse, 86.1, but I expect that to stabilize. Beyond the small sample size stats, they really just don't pass the eye test at all. I think this team has a lot to figure out. So I don't disagree. It's just so hard for me to, juice up the concern without seeing how they look when Booker plays in a bunch of games in a row, or all 3 of the stars in Durant and Beal play. And I have actually thought that they've been a little bit better on defense than I've expected. Not been super impressed by Yusuf Nurkic, but they're 10th in points allowed per 100 possessions right now, or 9th even. So they actually improved since I was doing research on this. You look at some of the issues they're going to have. They're experimenting with their rotations. I think there's value in that. I'm surprised they haven't gone to Nas Little more. It took them a while to get to Keita Bates-Diop as well. They played Josh Okogie a bunch. I think Udon Watanabe's had some really good moments for them. The center spot feels like it could be sort of a season-long tug of war. But because you're looking at them, and I think part of this might just be the makeup of the roster, but teams are getting out in transition too much against them right now. That will settle, though. They've turned the ball over a lot more than I would have expected. How much of that does it have to be with does it have to do with the newness of the roster together? I would think it would settle down at some point. And so allowing your defense to get set would be a big deal, but they've also just not been able to get back off misses. And Devin Booker is someone who will get back off misses. I think he is, there was a joke, I think it was from Rome 8180 in Discord, that just, I want a team made up of 15 Devin Bookers or whatever. He's one of my favorite players to watch. And I think I campaign for him so strongly because it feels like he still exists outside of the superstar tier for some. He is so critical to making this all work. And I don't think we appreciate, one, his scalability nearly enough. He's taken over from John Collins as just infinitely scalable for me. But this is someone who can fill in gaps aside from being the floor general of this team, where the Suns lack rim pressure right now and transition frequency. He will give you change of pace on and off the ball. I think he helps with that. I think he will help you get back better in defense. I think he'll give you some more options in your best lineups. Having him defensively and the effort that he's given probably the last year and a half to 2 years. I also think there's value, though, in them kind of experimenting with how they're going to run some of these rotations and who they're going to play right now. You want to figure it out now rather than in the playoffs. I will keep coming back to this. This is not the only issue they have. We need to see their 3 stars play in a bunch of games together. And I think there will still be nights where they kind of just lose the math. They're a team that's going to get to the free throw line a bunch, but will they take and make enough threes? That's also why Devin Booker is so critical to make this work. Of the 3 stars, he is the guy that you just point to, he'll juice up, jack up his 3-point volume. And so this team, I would almost say, I don't want to say it's a godsend that they're 3-4, but it's almost like they're almost kind of lucky that they're 3-4 at this point. They've played some really tough games. They've missed like really important players for some of those games. And I recognize that the defense is probably getting a little bit lucky right now because of perimeter shooting. I think opponents are shooting sub 34% on threes against them. They're also getting destroyed at the rim. Opponents are shooting like 69% there. They probably, again, the defense probably gotten a little lucky when you look at how opponents are shooting specifically from the perimeter. And you have to be concerned with, there's no true, even as much as you like Drew Eubanks, there's no true rim deterrent here. Like teams are going to, especially if you let them get out in transition, they're going to get to and finish at the rim against these guys. There are real concerns to be had, but we need to see all three of these, Booker, Beal, and Kevin Durant, not just playing together, but in the rotation for, like 7 games in a row or something, or just like, can we get a 7 to 10 game sample size with all three of those guys so we can see what their lineups look like? How are they staggering? What does the general rotation look like? And so I can't be too concerned until we get to that point. But there are certainly, along with secondary ball handling, there are valid concerns, not all of which are going to be addressed by the return of Bradley Beal and better availability from Devin Booker. This next question comes from Nikolche Kolev. I apologize if I mispronounced that. So how about the Heatles? I know their schedule's been tough, but their record is very disappointing. I know they have a midseason switch where they just get a lot better because of familiarity, but is it too hot of a take to say that they're going to miss out on the play-in? Whew. Is that too hot of a take? So the Heat are sitting 2-4. Boston, Philly, playing team. Yeah, it's probably not too hard. Cleveland will get going at some point as they get healthier. Is it too hot of a take to say that they can't? I don't know. It's probably not too hot of a take. This sounds like a team that expected itself to look a lot differently. And frankly, they don't look that much different. Some things to keep in mind, definitely not having Caleb Martin to start the year. That's a really big deal. Jimmy Butler's clearly banged up I think he's dealing with right knee issues right now, but the half-court offense, which is so predicated on him getting downhill, not getting to the rim at all. The mid-range jumpers aren't falling. Butler's rim frequency is plummeting. And is that going to do with the right knee issues? I know some Heat fans think he's just coasting right now. Whew. I don't know, man. The fact that he's shooting under 30% from mid-range, that's a big part of what he's able to do. I do think that you've had some positives when you look at Tyler Hero. He's had mostly a very good start to the year. Bam continues to evolve on the offensive end. He can do a lot more just self-creation stuff, and there's more complicated things he can do away from the ball. There's just not a ton of space in the half court right now. Threes are kind of falling, but only Boston and Cleveland are generating fewer wide open jumpers as a share of their attempts. And so you look at those teams and they have all these nuclear tough shot makers, the Jason Tatum in Boston, Donovan Mitchell, and a healthy Darius Garland in Cleveland. And you sort of look at those teams, you're like, well, Cleveland, they haven't even played the two bigs yet, so it's weird they're not generating more wide open jumpers. Boston, they just have so much spacing. Guys are maybe glued to the perimeter right now. I was actually surprised that wide open jumpers counted for such a low share, but they have such top end guys that when you're looking at Tatum and every Kristaps jumper is considered wide open because he's coming over the top of everybody. But that's a real problem for Miami. There's just not a lot of space. Teams are able to pack the paint against them still. They're able to, like some of the shooters, how long it takes them to get off shots, like they can really close out strongly. The Heat themselves are just not playing with a ton of pace consistently. They can vary it up depending on the lineups, but they look awfully slow at points. And so that would be a way to juice up your rim pressure is, can you do more damage in transition or at least prove to be more of a threat in transition right now? Miami at the moment is second in transition frequency, but they're not scoring efficiently in there. And they feel like a lot of it feels like kind of faux transition opportunities, if we're being honest from them. The bigger concern though is just the half court in general, where you're going to be bottom 10 in half court. You're not going to be a team that's crashing the offensive glass. They're second to last in half court offensive rebounding percentage. You need to figure out a way to clean that up. Is it running smaller? Is it running with lineups that are just going to get out and run a little bit more in general? The defense has been probably okay. They've been another team that's, when you look at it, probably gotten a little bit lucky when it comes to opponent shooting. They have the league's best 3-point defense at the moment. The teams are actually hitting their threes against Miami. So the fact that their defense is ranked as highly as it is, I must have had them confounded with someone else. What teams are not going to shoot over 40% against them from three for the rest of the season. I think when you look at that, they're allowing 70% shooting at the rim. The fact that their defense just barely ranks outside of the top 10 probably bodes a little bit well for them. They are a team that's still going to be able to force turnovers, and you can change up the pace that way. That's helped them at some points to get out in transition. But again, it's about finishing and taking the right shots in transition. But Miami's going to need to, when you're not getting to the basket, or if you don't have Jimmy being Jimmy, like you're just, who's the other person that you're going to trust to draw those, free throw parades, which are some easy points for an offense like this to score? Who are you trusting for from scratch creation from on the perimeter? It's Tyler Hero. If Jimmy Butler isn't that guy, you're asking a lot of Kyle Lowry in that instance. Let's see how they get when they get healthier. I will say this is not a hot take, Nicole J. I don't think to say that they aren't able to flip a switch. That doesn't feel like a hot take. This team is materially different. There's a deficit of the guys that were playing the most last year. And I think even when you dig into it, until their last game, their starting five that they were using was kind of obliterating opponents. And so that's a nice little baseline that you're going to be able to, or at least their most used 5-man unit. That's a nice little baseline when you have Love, Adebayo, Butler, Hero, and Lowry. They're outscoring opponents by 26 points per 100 possessions right now. And so like, that's a nice baseline to be able to work off of. But you've seen a lot of, when you're going and, Thomas Bryant's playing some minutes, and you've seen the defense kind of sacrifice in there without really there being an offensive benefit. You'd be able to steal some minutes on the wings with a Jaime Jaquez, but getting to lineups where it's okay, we're kind of a little bit smaller. It's not a traditional, like not Kevin Love on the court, a team that can maybe play with more pace or be more versatile on the defensive end. Haywood Highsmith is probably really important to that working. And we've seen some where you slide him into, we'll call it Haywood Highsmith plus the 4 main guys. Caleb Martin in that regard will be huge for this team. And I just, I don't want to say that's going to be something that solves everything for them. So it's probably too spicy to say that they'll miss the play. And we need to get anything along those lines. Is probably a little bit spicy when we're sub 10 games into the season. But your concern is duly noted, and I don't think it's unfounded. Next question here comes from Carrigan. The Jazz need a point guard. Who would be the perfect fit? Here's what's interesting is I eventually do believe that Keontae George will be the answer for this team. And so what you're trying to do is, because I would agree that, yes, it'd be nice to see them have sort of a veteran floor general, but you want someone who is not going, who can either play off of him in the long term or is more of a stopgap to where when he's ready, maybe they could spend some time with him, but when he is ready to be just the guy, you can move away from them. And so I have a bunch of names here. The ideal fit, I will say, he's not available and you can't be traded at the moment anyway, because he signed his extension and then the poison pill and stuff. But LaMelo Ball for this team would look really, really like, picture him playing alongside Walker Kessler, Larry Markkinen. He could play next to Keontae George. That is like the player. And so if we're fast forwarding to the offseason and Charlotte's kind of cratering and LaMelo's getting a little itchy, that's just the name. That's not the name, but that is a name that I'd be interested in. Trying to be a little bit more realistic here, though. So some of these I'll start with the ones that I think are super realistic. Tyus Jones in Washington would be a really good game manager to get. He won't turn the ball over. He'll make a lot of good plays in the pocket. He should hit enough of his threes away from the ball to where if you want to try playing him with Keontae or just give Larry Markkinen some of those from scratch touches. And then he's in an expiring contract. I'd be curious what it takes to get him. And the Jazz are not a team that would normally look at getting this veteran on an expiring contract. You have to give up value, and you would have to believe that you're in the play-in chase, try to make the play-in. I don't think they're going to be super interested in that. They have the second worst record in the West right now. But like, if you just want some organization there, does 2 seconds get him? If I'm Washington, I might just rather have his bird rights, but Spencer Dinwiddie, if the Nets wind up selling, that's someone, money's a little bit big, but it's an expiring contract. What does that cost? He is someone who will give you some floor organization, some defensive intensity at points as well. Do you want to play him and Keontae George? If you trust Keontae George's jumper, because Spencer Dinwiddie's can wax and wane, but that would be a nifty option. You could throw Emmanuel quickly in here as well. By the way, Jalen Brunson would be a great fit for them if the Knicks really ever just decide to blow it up if their season goes off the rails. I don't think the Knicks are looking to move quickly in advance of him entering restricted free agency. And you're going to have to give up, I would say, a first-round pick to get him. And he's too important to the Knicks offense right now. I'm throwing out names from the Jazz perspective I'd be monitoring. There's pathways to, well, if the Knicks kind of continue down this path and quickly staring at a $20-25 million a year contract, do they get a little itchy? So he would be, just to try it. He's not the passer that you would necessarily want, but as a defender and someone who's going to stretch the floor. And it's just, when you look at who he's a better passer than Jordan Clarkson might be a better passer than Immanuel Quickley at this point. But I'm not trusting, THT or Chris Dunn doesn't have the consistency level on offense that Immanuel Quickley would. I would 100% trade for Kyle Anderson and just start him at point guard. Don't know how gettable he is in Minnesota, but he is entering a contract year. And times the Utah Jazz and the Timberwolves going to trade with each other, you do get into, all right, what does the defense look like? Because you're going to have Lowry, Marketing, Collins, and Kessler, and then Anderson. That's really, really huge. But Kyle Anderson should not be defending at the point of attack. And so you're going to start him. If Jordan Clarkson's remaining in that unit, that's going to be a no. You can bring Anderson off the bench, though, and play him at point guard pretty easily and mix and match some of your rotations that way. Another question would be, how gettable is Andrew Nembhard? Would be a really good pickup for them. Someone who's a really good steward of the game. He will space the floor. He can defend up, but he can also defend his own position. He's super cheap. The Pacers, they are using him. I was worried that he might get buried a little bit more than he has. I've actually not looked at how many minutes he's playing. He was at like 21, I think, when I last checked, which I think is based off the players. Oh, he's down to 20 and a half. It's just like, hey, because they have TJ McConnell there, you go after TJ McConnell as well. He's playing less than Andrew Nembhard, but I really like Nembhard. The 3-point clip is fallen off a cliff at the moment. That's still someone, though, defensively who you can trust as a controlling playmaker. And I think we've seen, look, he will hit more than 12% of his threes. Like, he shot 35% on negligible volume this year, but he's not a 12% 3-point shooter. That might actually be my favorite name. I don't know how realistic it is. I would pay money to see them try and get Jalen Pickett from Denver. I just don't think the Nuggets are going to want to give up on him. His sort of just like herky-jerky change of cadence game would work really well. And then two more names that they're probably not super. One of them can't even be traded right now, but just would be interesting if the Jazz were looking to improve. Markelle Fultz entering a contract year. You don't need his shooting. He's become a really good passer, serviceable from the mid-range, and he's a really good defender. And then also Fred VanVleet. That's someone who's going to help your defense as well. His 3-point clip has been all over the place this year, just sort of like it was last year. But if he's going to shoot 35% on such a super high volume, that counts as floor spacing, and he can play on or off the ball. Whereas Fultz, you might run into some off-ball issues. You have enough space to where you could get him moving off the ball, and the Magic have done a good job of that at points. But I would love those two names. I think my favorite names off this list, and one of them I still haven't mentioned, again, LaMelo would be, I'd love to see him on this roster. But realistically, my favorite names where I could see them maybe becoming available, Tyus Jones, who has to be already available, and just Markelle Fultz and Fred VanVleet and Andrew Nembhard would be my top options. And if I'm saying between Fultz and VanVleet, I think VanVleet's more likely to become available. Matching money, just because of where the Rockets are. Matching money might get a little bit tough because the Jazz have they can get the salaries there, but you're looking at like, it's more than THT and Olynyk. You need like 3 players to get there unless you want to tap into the John Collins element of it. And I don't know why Houston would be interested. So Fultz would be more interesting from that perspective. And another name I did not mention would be something to maybe keep an eye on longer term. You don't need, when you're looking at, because of how good Lowry Marketing is, and that Keontae George is there, and because of the spacing that I think you can carve out with a bunch of these lineups, I don't know that you need someone to be, you need more of, I'll say, either someone who could be connective tissue, like a Fred VanVleet, or just someone who is good enough as a passer. Markelle Fultz would be an example where it's a league average type passer. And so if you go after DeJounte Murray, depending on what happens in Atlanta over time, these are much longer term solutions. The more immediate one, look, Andrew Nembhard would just be the guy, and Tyus Jones. Like, those are the two immediate ones. The other ones I'm naming are sort of, some of them could be available this season. Most of them won't be. DeJounte Murray did sign his contract late enough that I think he can be traded this year. I'll double check that as I'm recording this. The Jazz are not, it wouldn't surprise me if they made kind of a consolidation type trade. Yeah, DeJounte Murray can be traded in January. But like those names, the Fultz, the Van Vliets, you would have to give up value for basically all of these guys. Tyus Jones and Nembhard feel like, okay, maybe their cost is low enough that they would make this type of a move. But DeJounte Murray would just be a name long-term because of the defense that he brings. He's not an A-plus passer, but he's kind of like a B-minus passer, which I think is really all this team needs from that position, at least within its top lineups. And maybe that just speaks to more of me being a believer in Keontae George. It's more so just, can you get an upgrade over Clarkson, Dunn, THT as those guys in the meantime? And I think DeJounte Murray would certainly qualify as that. Our next question comes from Pito. Scottie Barnes started the season on fire, and it looks like he's taking a leap. If you were the Raptors, would you lean on him being the de facto point guard, or would you look towards trading Siakam and maybe find a guard to pair with him? Good timing on this question. Scottie Barnes absolutely lit it up against the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday night. I've been really impressed with basically everything that he's done. You're not really, they're not channeling it. The offense is still just very wonky, very clumpy at points, but they have decided, and I think rightfully so, because you want to know whether Scottie Barnes is a player around which you can build. They want to know what they have in him. And I think what he has shown offensively, looking a little bit comfortable, reacting to double teams or passing out of traffic, that is valuable information, because this proves to me that he is someone around whom you can build rather than just someone who's going to be part of that build. I'd like to see him ditch, some of the laborious turnarounds, but a lot of them are going in right now. And he's shooting on, by the way, 5.4 3-point attempts per game. He's shooting 42.1%, 56% on his twos. This is still someone I think could stand to get to the rim more, not shy away from contact as much. I don't know how you are upset with his start to the season. Even the defensive effort has been better. You look at the counting stats, you look at tracking, you just watch him. It's just better. 23 points with an average. I don't know if the 2 blocks are going to stick per game. That's something that stands out to me, but 23 and 6, he's averaging almost 10 rebounds per game, by the way, as well. He's playing a ton of minutes. Oh, really, 36 and a half. That's light work if you were being coached by Nick Nurse, which you're not. So the pathway forward is, okay, let's absolutely build around Scottie Barnes. I think that this is someone, when I was doing the breakouts, I included him in the 3rd-year leaps rather than the star bound. It was just a way of sort of getting all the players I wanted to talk about in. This is absolutely someone now. When you look at the Mobley and Cunningham and Barnes, all those guys are someone I would bet on making numerous all-star teams right now. Scottie Barnes is fantastic. And so now you know that he is and he might have always been. They didn't include him in KD trade talks. They didn't include him for Damian Lillard. They've always valued him highly. But now you have this information, even amid, a less than stellar start to the season. You know that he is someone who can dictate the terms of your rebuild. Where do you go from here is basically what Pito is asking. I still believe, in theory, that Pascal Siakam and Scottie Barnes can work together. Pascal Siakam has hit enough of his catch and shoot threes for that to work in theory. I'm more skeptical of it being, when one of the other guards you're going to play sometimes, looking at a Dennis Schroeder, is not going to space the floor, and you have Jakob Poeltl who's not going to space the floor. That's where the crunch begins to come in, to where you need to get another, if you want to say an actual point guard type, because Scottie Barnes will do most of the ball handling. You have Siakam there, but if it's going to be Schroeder, if it's going to be someone else, you need that spot to get more shooting, or you need to change your primary big in Poeltl. It's a lot easier to change up the guard stuff there. Just finding rim protecting shooters at the 5 spot is, every team would love to do that. So it's unbelievably difficult. And I think that's where the issue comes in, because right now when you're looking at Siakam, his role has changed. He is standing, S. Barahini had pointed this out for SDPN, and it's evident too when you watch it. He's being used more just kind of as a bystander in the corner. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but when you're getting into, how can we still optimize Siakam on the ball? It's not happening right now because the lineups are just so clumpy. Even if he's hitting his threes, even if Barnes is hitting his threes, they're not being defended like they're hitting their threes when they're off the ball. It's just, Siakam is shooting on drives 26.3%. Out of 100 players who have finished at least 25 drives this year, that's 97th. And so that needs to, Siakam, look, he's going to be better. This is someone who has worked within negative spacing before. And I think between Grady Dick's, and now that I've seen some more of the Raptors, Grady Dick just being on the floor and being able to move around, that's a breath, as Mike H would say from Discord, of fresh air to see. The Raptors I think they've had higher highs this season than when you look at some of the games that they've played, that Bulls one, and you look at their record where it's it's 3-4. And you kind of felt at some point, you felt like the world was ending. I think they've had higher highs than I would have expected for a team that still does have a negative point differential, for a team that still needs to be concerned about the half court offense. And if there are going to be Raptors fans in the YouTube comments who are not concerned about the half court offense, more power to you. You're still for the season, Toronto there. It's not as egregious anymore. They've moved up from 30th to now 29th. Portland has the worst half court offense now in the league. Not too surprising when you look at their personnel. So what would I do with Siakam? I mean, it seems like he wants to be in Toronto or just have the right to be a free agent. And so I'm not willy-nilly going to move him, because you probably missed the best time to move him. I just don't know how much he commands as an expiring contract where there's only part of the season left, rather than doing this over the offseason when you could have integrated him in training camp and the preseason. But if you're not going to figure out a way to get, and I don't even know who the perfect player to this would be. It feels like the Raptors, if they want to optimize the Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam pairing long-term, that they need another player. It doesn't need to be a star, but someone who's going to sort of open up a lot of their most used lineups. And can that come at the expense of Jakob Poeltl? Can it come at the expense of Dennis Schroeder? Some people might think it's just Gary Trent Jr. Is that just sort of the answer there? You can sub him out if you trust for more of those minutes, if you trust Scottie Barnes to run point. I mean, sure. I think that spot still needs more of a playmaker if you're going to go that route. And I don't have the exact answer, but I can't get on board with moving Siakam unless it's for, I think if you're going to go that route, then you need to kind of be picking up like wings that are just going to space. They don't need to be stars. You have Barnes. You're still invested in Anunoby, it seems like. But it would need to be someone who's going to consistently open the floor from those wing spots then. And that's just not, there are players like Mikal Bridges. If you're trying to like look mid-end, not super, that would make sense. Why are the Jazz sending him out in sort of a Pascal Siakam trade? This is going to step on the toes of something that I think we're going to cover later in this mailbag, but an interesting challenge trade. I understand. I think this is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. Zach LaVine for Pascal Siakam might be kind of an interesting challenge trade here. You're not going to put the ball in LaVine's hands with Barnes, and you have enough defense, I think, to insulate him, but you would still pretty clearly need Zach LaVine to be your second best player. And I'm not just because of what he does on offense, but just having the off the dribble 3-point shooting, and even he's a good enough catch and shoot player as well. But you look at the Raptors right now, and they're outscoring opponents by 22 points per 100 possessions when Barnes, Siakam, and Anunoby share the floor. And that's why I'm just reluctant to think along these terms where it's kind of just dead where they stand. And I'm not criticizing, I'm questioning the lineup viability of Schroeder and Poeltl with those three. They're a plus 14 points per 100 possession on the season. And the offense has been not thermonuclear, but it's been decidedly above average there. And you get into some of the lineups that you want to see more of. And we haven't seen Gary Trent Jr. subbed in for Jakob Poeltl. Might be a way to go. We haven't seen a ton of that this year. You could try to play like super big at that point. Is Otto Porter Jr. coming in for Poeltl, so you're still on the bigger end there. We haven't seen a ton of that this year. I think it really comes down to, though, if you want Siakam and Barnes to stay long term, it comes down to getting another floor spacer there who could either play the 5 or is just in the backcourt with Scottie Barnes and maybe can defend some point of attack too. I don't know if that's Gary Trent Jr. I think when you're looking at names that become available this year, no one, I feel like the player I'm asking for needs to be a megastar, and the Raptors don't need that if you're keeping Siakam and Barnes. I just find it hard to believe that with Siakam and Anunoby and even Gary Trent Jr. heading towards free agency, I find it a little bit hard to believe that this team is going to remain the same. But I could see they're good enough to where, well, maybe it's another consolidation trade that they're making. I wish I had names. I've been racking my brain for them. The Zach LaVine challenge trade was just semi-interesting. Could you get Zach LaVine without giving up Siakam, Barnes, or Anunoby would be the question at this point. And then it's okay, well, now we're getting interesting. Zach LaVine's your third best player. You have him in I guess I would throw him in for Schroeder and just lean into Barnes as the one in those starting lineups. But so LaVine, Anunoby, Siakam, and Barnes is a setup And then you could, if you wanted to, still play Schroeder in that and move Siakam and Anunoby up a spot. But like Pirtle being, I just think it's, that would be the route I would try to explore is, can we do something where it's that type, it's like an off the dribble 3-point shooter. It's a very good, reliable catch and shoot guy who gives you a little bit more dribble creation than Gary Trent Jr. is going to get tunnel vision at points. And then Grady Dick, that's just not his bet. Like as a motion shooter for sure. I think a lot of Raptors fans would hate the idea of LaVine there, but Raptors fans, if you're listening, if you could get LaVine without giving up Siakam, Anunoby, or Barnes. I'm not trying to make this, take all our bad players or players we don't need for Zach LaVine. Like, you're just building it on picks. Chicago decides to rebuild, and it's picks and salary is just the meat and potatoes of the deal. Do you hate that, Raptors fans? I don't. I don't. But that's where I'm at. So I'm not out on Siakam Barnes just yet, Pito, but I do think that it's very clearly like with Siakam entering free agency and how there's still just not a ton of room in the half court for this team. I think if you're going to keep those both, there still needs to be something done to open it up. Our next question comes from JT Alexander S. Perfect landing spot for Zach LaVine. Speaking of, we're just going to get right to the Zach LaVine trades. I'm intrigued by Toronto. It was just Siakam for LaVine and Patrick Williams. Isn't that an interesting challenge trade? I don't want Raptors fans to hate us. And I don't know. I think Bulls fans are just like so numb right now. They probably would be Zach LaVine for like Tobias Harris. They'll just be numb to anything I propose. That's a semi, maybe not like Zach LaVine for Williams and Siakam is a fairly interesting challenge trade. Who needs to give up picks in that scenario? Patrick Williams has been really rough to start the year. That's just an interesting challenge trade for both teams. Can someone agree with me, please? Pretty please, without fleshing it out, like just the basis of that. Other spots for Zach LaVine, the Knicks. I know Knicks fans tend to be lower on that, and that's not the guy that you want to push all your chips on. The defense has been good enough, though. If you're moving, I think you need to move away from Julius Randle. I don't know if he's in that deal, but if you're getting LaVine and Julius Randle's leaving the team or coming off the bench, I mean, he would have to be there. Julius Randle has to go if you're getting Zach LaVine. That's where I'm at. They're still a team that I think could really use him. He'd open things up for Jalen Brunson and RJ Barrett a ton. Maybe RJ Barrett needs to be part of that deal. I'd rather see RJ Barrett stay. I think the Knicks have the pick equity to at least get that done. The Sixers for sure. Maxey, LaVine, and Embiid. I don't know if they have the wing defense to kind of make up for that at this point. You have the Anthony Melton, super reliable, and you did get if Nick Batum ever reports to the team. And you did get Rocco. Some of those guys would have to go out as matching salary unless it's Tobias Harris, who's had a pretty good start to the year. I mentioned Toronto. I think so. Now some of these Miami, I think you could make a case for. It would just be a little bit of a bummer. I don't know. I don't know how much of an upgrade individually Zach LaVine is over Tyler Hero. There's more levels to Zach LaVine's offense, but I think Hero is probably the better passer at this point. And so do you want to keep Hero as part of that then? How much are you playing Hero and Zach LaVine together? But just because of where Miami's half-court offense is at, LaVine, Bam, and Jimmy's a hell of a trio. And theoretically, you could keep, if you're moving Lowry and other salaries. I mean, you might even be able to keep Lowry as well. Just use Duncan Robinson's salary as the anchor. I think you would still need to move Lowry as part of that. But if you're able to keep Hero and get LaVine, there's a little bit redundancy, but they're both so capable off the ball. I wouldn't hate it. I thought about Indiana for a second, but their offense is just too good. And I just we're already trying to, I'm not a Benedict Mathurin person per se, but we're already trying to figure out what the Pacers are going to do defensively. And Caitlin Cooper was just talking about on Twitter, I think, about when their defense looks the best and all the stuff that she was describing, Zach LaVine cannot be a part of. The Lakers, do they have enough? The shine is worn off of Austin Reeves. You're not going to be able to trade a boatload of picks. That'll be more open for them probably over the offseason, depending on the asking price. I mean, their half-court offense, though, could use it. And so it's like once D'Lo is eligible to be traded, can we get, is there a way to get there? Like, are the Bulls interested enough in Austin Reeves to, move him and then D'Lo and picks? A little bit rough there. Memphis, but not really. Just like right now, yeah, Memphis. But you have Smart, you have Bane, John Morant will come back. I don't love that fit. I wondered if New Orleans would be, and we have New Orleans fans in the Discord. So again, don't get mad at me. I'm throwing stuff out here. Would they be better off with Zach LaVine's 3-point volume than they would with Brandon Ingram? Brandon Ingram is the better player, but when I look at what's happening, we have another question on New Orleans later. That CJ McCollum injury, man, collapsed lung. I was Sunday, like I said, I was so fried. And I woke up to that news. Like I was taking a nap and it was just such a bummer. The Pelicans just can't catch a break. And they're not even, I know you could say, well, that's the thing with all these guys. They're always kind of injured. It's not a chronic injury for any of these dudes. It's just shit keeps happening. That was a bummer to find out. The team that there are two teams that I think I don't know that their fan bases would appreciate it, but I think that he would make a huge difference. Minnesota, do you have enough, like with Towns, do you have enough to get Zach LaVine from Chicago? Your pick equity is just a bust. And so do they have interest in any of your youngsters plus Towns, or do they view that as a challenge trade? Uh, we're talking about the best defense in Minnesota. You run Edwards, McDaniels, LaVine, Gobert as like and Conley as like those are your units. You're asking Edwards to kind of move up and McDaniels to move up. I don't know, man. I would love it. I would love it. And especially just as like Mike Conley's getting into free agency and you don't know if he's going to be back. I think LaVine does a lot to improve their offense, and him and Anthony Edwards can play off each other. I have no doubt in my mind. That'd be a fun reunion. And then I would still be on about this. This team is not, Minnesota has real urgency to what they're trying to do. This team does not, even though they have the potential to be really good. Orlando, they are 23rd in half-court offense, which I believe is a little bit of an improvement. They've had some rough games from Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero at different points this season, actually sometimes in the same night. Their ceiling is higher than what we've kind of seen from them right now. I fully believe, as currently constructed, they're a team that, look, they're 4-2. They have one of the best defenses in the league. I think they can insulate Zach LaVine defensively enough to be like, this might be interesting to try. And I don't know. I think what some of the issue is that, okay, so you're just defaulting to your top five guys at that point is Paolo, Franz Wagner, Wendell Carter Jr., then Fultz and LaVine. Like that's a pretty interesting starting five where you're basically from your preferred 5-man unit, you're deciding, well, we're going to sub out Jalen Suggs for Zach LaVine. Like that's a hell of an offensive upgrade. And you have the scratch to kind of, to make that deal happen without having to include, I don't know where you'd land on, do we want to give up Jalen Suggs for, like, you don't have to move Carter Jr. to do it. You're definitely not moving Paolo or Franz Wagner to do it. But are you willing to move Suggs in a LaVine deal and a first or two? I think that's reasonable. I just don't know if that's kind of jibing with Orlando's timeline. I will say I've been impressed with Anthony Black in his minimal minutes within like this offensive ecosystem that I thought I was going to be. And that was someone that I really liked leading into the draft, but I thought he ended up in a spot where I wasn't going to appreciate what he could do. Probably judged too soon there. We'll see how his minutes continue to tick up as the season goes on. So, like, would you give up? Like, you would have to give up one of those dudes. It's Suggs or Anthony Black to get in the Zach LaVine sweepstakes. Plus picks, salary matching gets a little tough, but you have Gary Harris there. You do. I mean, once Joe Ingles, he could be an important part of that trade. Once you get to a certain time of the year, I think some people might still want to hold out for Jonathan Isaac, but you have him. Like, you can get to the salary for LaVine without including any of your core guys. Would you give up Suggs or Anthony Black for Zach LaVine and plus picks? I would definitely. I would give up Suggs because he's playing the position. Suggs is great defensively. And I think I'm not worried about his start to the season, 43% on two. I still believe in Jalen Suggs, but it might make sense to move him now when he still kind of has a little bit of that mystique. If it was both and picks, I probably wouldn't do it. But if it's one in picks and salary, I think I would consider it. I think Zach LaVine makes a huge difference for that team personally. Next question, Rome 81180. You actually had a great question, but I'm going to save that for when I can do it with Grant about young teams winning titles. So I would like to, that's one where I feel like I need more of a, like, I need someone else here for me. Let's look at, there's some ones that came in that I have not had the opportunity to like go in depth on, but let's get to a couple more of these mailbag ones. This is just going to be a long episode. Thought it was going to be short. Rubik Scout asks, it turns out I do have another mailbag question. Do we like the catch and shoot gunner that rough timing. Do we like the catch and shoot gunner that McCollum is turning into? 56% of his shots and 83% of his 3-point makes this season are assisted. Both of those are career highs. Get well soon, CJ. I think it's huge. I think it's I love do I love it? I love it, and I think it's necessary because the Pelicans are still at a 3-point shooting deficit, not just on most nights, but when you're looking at like their best units, with the exception of, so when you're going to see them run out that, the CJ, I think it's CJ, Herb, Matt Ryan, Jonas Valanciunas, and then Jordan Hawkins unit. Yeah, CJ is going to be, you need him for a ton of self-creation in there. But when you're looking at their most used lineups right now, like some of them aren't even getting it done on the offensive glass. And so like if you don't have the 3-point deficit to if you're not bridging the gap in the 3-point deficit, that can make it very hard to, as Shamit Dua likes to really hammer home with this team from the In the Know podcast and Substack, like that could make it very hard to win the possession battle. And so we've seen games where they've done a great job of winning the possession battle because of what they're doing on the offensive glass. We've also seen games where if you lose the battle on the glass, it becomes incredibly difficult for them to then win the possession battle, just if you're ever at a deficit in there. And so I think CJ taking more threes, not needing the ball to hit them is super necessary for this team when he's healthy. Now, does this hold up when Trey Murphy III comes back? I mean, I would say, I don't know how Trey Murphy ends up changing CJ McCollum's role. I think he would help sort of bridge the gap on 3-point volume with New Orleans right now, where they've made 68 threes on the season. And it's just like, that's very middle of the road. You would like to see that number come up. I don't even know what their 3-point attempt rate is offhand. I don't really know why I should. I'm like mad that I don't know that offhand. I don't know why I should know every team's 3-point attempt rate offhand. But the Pelicans right now in 3-point attempt rate are 15th. And so like the volume just isn't, and above the break, like they're even lower. They're 22nd. And so you'd like to see that ideally would be able to tick up. And when you're kind of looking at like, all right, well, if they've made 68 threes, their opponents they've tied that. Wow, 68-68. You're almost lucky that you have not lost the 3-point battle there overall in net for the season. But when you look at some of the lineups they're running, they're still just not taking enough threes. And the spacing is so hard up. We've seen it a lot with the unit that's going to have Zion, Herb in there. Like it's not been, BI missing time. That certainly fudges some of these returns. I just think that this development from CJ, who was having a really good season before dealing with this lung stuff, I think it's mission critical. And especially if you want, you're looking at that, we'll call it the presumed starting 5, because Herb Jones has played so well. I know there were people, and I might have been one of them. They just weren't about like, hey, maybe we should start Trey Murphy. You could do that certainly with CJ McCollum out, although I don't know if you're going to want to go. I'm trying to think when BI and Zion and Murphy are all healthy, do you start all of those guys with Herb and Valanciunas? I guess, yeah, between Zion and Ingram, that's enough playmaking. But you look at that starting 5 this year, 29.4% of their shots are coming from 3. That's not enough. And only 21.2% of their shots are coming as above the break threes. You need to get that volume up there. And so I think on a night-to-night basis, maybe not sometimes net in some, you are at a large enough 3-point deficit that this developmental turn from CJ at this late in his career, I think it's nothing but a good sign. But we have to see what this team looks like fully healthy. And that lineup that everyone loves that we're not going to see for a minute, they're taking 37%, more than 37% of their shots from deep. That is like, that's the goal they need to have. Even when you sub out Herb Jones for Dyson Daniels, that lineup is actually taking 54.5% of their shots from threes. 39.4% is above the break threes. If it's in service of that, but improving the 3-point baseline for the lineups that are going to have Zion and BI, I think that's where it becomes super important for CJ McCollum. Hopefully that makes sense. I tend to be a little bit rambly if I haven't studied for the questions. Everything Blacks. Ooh, this is a good one that I feel like I should have looked at and then thought more about. All right. Everything Blacks. You find a basketball lamp and out pops an NBA genie who will grant you 3 wishes affecting the current NBA season. What do you wish for? I wish for career best availability from all injury prone stars. I want to see Zion play in 70 games, Kawhi play in 70 plus games, all that jazz. What else would I wish for? I would like to see players. I would like to see players. I want a rule. Okay, here's what I want. I want a rule where if a player insists on getting a challenge and has their coach unit and use it and burn it, that they can get fined or penalized in some way. They have to run. Yeah, you know what? They have to run sprints, full court sprints for a full minute, full bore in front of the entire arena during a dead ball. If you are coaxing I don't care if you're a star or if you're the ninth player in the rotation, if you coax your coaching staff into using a challenge, specifically like in the first half, and it's not successful, that's what you need to do. That's what absolutely needs to happen. I want that to be a rule. So those are my 2. 3 wishes. That I need a third one that affects this NBA season. I don't want to focus on a single team. Oh no, here it is. I want someone else. Like, can we get one of the creators who you see them, they make these jerseys on Twitter? Like, you can get NBA Paint to do it, but you see these people on Twitter. I want them to design alternate jerseys for all 30 teams. How's that? I'm going to ask for a do-over on these City Edition jerseys, but we get to pick like the designers, and there's these more individual designers per team. And so you can see there are accounts where they just throw out these jerseys and they look incredible on Twitter or Instagram. And it's like, just commission these people. They're doing a bang up job and Nike can't get it done. And so we're going to come full circle back to how we opened the podcast with Austin, and really just, cross our fingers that these jerseys can get better. And so I am wishing for career or close to it availability from all the injury prone stars. I want players to have to run wind sprints for a full minute in front of a full arena during a dead ball of a game if they force their coaching staff to use a challenge and it's unsuccessful. And I'm going to wish for a do-over on all the NBA City Edition jerseys, quite frankly. And we get to collectively, not we as fans collectively, the Hardwood Knocks Discord. That's why you go and join the Hardwood Knocks Discord. We get to choose who's designing each team's jersey. Let's see. There were conditions to that I didn't say. You can't ask for more Wembys. You can't bring back someone who is retired. You can't force a player to love a front office. I think and that was the joke. Let's be real. Dan is just going to ask for 225 Devin Bookers and 225 Evan Mobleys. Yeah, I mean, and maybe he'll leave a spot for Frank Ntilikina. And this might be the final question we get to. Glad asked, could we get a Dan and Frank Ntilikina backstory? I love it when people care enough about me specifically and my proclivities to ask questions. Although Mike H.S. is Thad Young from Malachi Branham, one of the worst trades in recent memory. Holy hell. Pick number 20 with Malachi Branham, still the floater king, starting for the Spurs the other night with Devin Vassell injured. Yeah, that's a pretty bad. The Raptors been a little bit haphazard with their picks. But let's get to this question about me and my Frank Ntilikina origin story. As Rubiscal pointed out, if you need receipts, apparently has receipts on all my shit. I think Dan featured the Frenchman in a 2018 article about surprise NBA players to stand for, along with the likes of De'Aaron Fox, Josh Hart, and Maxi Kleber, right after a speculatory, underwhelming rookie season when he averaged crappy numbers. If I did in fact write that article in 2018, can I dislocate my shoulder, patting myself on the back? I mean, Maxi Kleber, De'Aaron Fox, Josh Hart, that all aged fairly well. Look, the thing with Frank Ntilikina was I looked at him. It was into the draft process. I always become obsessed with certain players. Sometimes they're hits, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Sometimes they're misses. Like, we won't invoke Frank Ntilikina here because he was clearly a hit, but like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that was someone who I became obsessed with as well. I looked at him and I saw a very raw player on offense, but everything he did looked fluid. And maybe it was because of his length. A lot of the time it looked fluid, but the way he could dribble inside the lane, it looked like it was fluid. It feels like he never developed the quicker fire decision-making. Just even when you're looking at his jump shot, I thought the mechanics were okay, but there's not real like speed to it or a rhyme or reason to it. And it takes so long for him to go through that process. I also appreciate like what he was able to do on defense. And I can't remember who I compared him to in that lead up, but it was like, what if Avery Bradley was longer and could dribble is how I compared him. And I really thought that Frank Ntilikina was going to be this difference maker. And I think you've seen the difference making moments on defense that he can just come in cold and get real stops. But man, it's been rough out here. And now we don't know if he's going to play this season, given after getting an injury. He did sign on with Charlotte. I was worried he wasn't going to land with an NBA team. I would have wished that he landed with a better NBA team, but they have a real void kind of in the backup guard spot. So I would love for Frank Ntilikina to be healthy and maybe get some run there. Final question here from Austin. Good point I just heard today. With all the effort and hype they are putting into the new tournament, can they not come up with a better name than the in-season tournament and in-season tournament trophy? And if so, what it should be called? Everything Black said, it's a test run. Prove that it's a viable product. Enter sponsorship later. Get ready for the Kia NBA Midseason Classic in the years to come, though. The trophy almost certainly gets named after David Stern, I think. As Glad points out, they're calling it the NBA Cup. I don't think that's very... As Everything Black said, it all feels very placeholder. I don't know what a name would be. Let's say it doesn't have to be sponsored, or even if it could be sponsored, give us a name. You could submit a name. What should they call the actual NBA Cup? That's not the NBA trophy or the David Stern NBA Cup, whatever they're going to wind up naming it. Or if you want to, like, is there a really good branding opportunity? Like the Smokies Cannabis Cup, or just something ridiculous like that. I'd be all for it. But like, what's do you like the name of the championship trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy? Is it like, do we want that type of thing? The David Stern midseason cup? I don't know. It would be a great name, but I'm with Everything Blacks in the sense, everything feels super placeholder right now. And they're just trying to drum up interest. And the fact that we're talking about the courts, and I think that, there were a lot of teams. We'll see if this holds. There are teams that will have, I think I saw this note, no in-season tournament games take place as the second night of a back-to-back, but some of them are the first night of a back-to-back. Could that impact the effort as just time goes on? The fact that it's just like a month long, basically, I'm still very interested in it. I recorded a huge segment on that, so you can go check it out. That'll do it. Good mailbag here. I think I got to every question that was in there, aside from Rome's. Grant and I think we'll tackle yours together next time we record. Please, if you made it all the way to the end, remember to subscribe, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, leave ratings and reviews on Apple and Spotify. If you've done all those things, please tell people about us. Word of recommendations go a long way. You can help us by promoting the podcast on Twitter as well, or Blue Sky if you're following me on there. Follow us on all the socials. Links are in the podcast and YouTube description. Join our Discord. How many times do I have to plug that? Go join it. Link is in the podcast and YouTube description. And finally, if you'd like to support the show, you could check out our merch. That is in the link to the podcast in the YouTube description. And with that, we leave it to shout out to the one, the only, the indelible. We will never stop shouting him out, although maybe we will. But that day is not today if we do. Frank Ntilikina.